Okay, so we're going to talk about what causes the heart to beat. And I've drawn a very stylized diagram of the heart there. I'm going to talk about the key features of that. But the heart doesn't need any external nervous stimulus to make it beat. It has its own intrinsic rhythm, and it will beat without any nervous stimulation. Okay. Now, the heart is made up of a particular kind of muscle cells called cardiac myocytes. Okay, and they are the cells which can contract, and you have them in the atria and the ventricles, and cause the blood to be squeezed. Okay, now in the atrium, in the right atrium, you have a special piece of tissue called the Sinoatrial Node. Okay, and apparently if you dissect the heart, you can see this, and it is a region of myocytes which have been specialized, and they are sometimes it's sometimes called the pacemaker. And these cells make they fire. They have an action potential, and they'll do that about 70 times a minute. The cells, all of the cells of the sinoatrial node will fire, have an action potential, and they'll all go at the same time. So the reason why they go all at the same time is because I've just drawn down here some myocytes. There's two myocytes, and this green bit in between them is called a gap junction. And there are holes in this cell membrane which enables the cytoplasm of one cell to be continuous with the cytoplasm of another. So that means any changes in iron concentration will be will jump from one cell to another, and there's no need for a synapse. The specialized myocytes of the sinoatrial node have gap junctions, and all the other myocytes also have gap junctions, which means they all work in unison, really. Okay, so here's a diagram of the action potential that you get in the sinoatrial node, and you probably, if you've done the action potential in nerve cells, it looks reasonably similar. It's not exactly the same, but it looks basically the same shape. But it's and you don't need to know what generates this, but for the point of view of interest, it's not sodium ions entering the cell which causes this depolarization to become more positive. It's not sodium ions, it's actually calcium ions in the cardiac myocytes. So that's a bit different to a nerve. So calcium ions are entering there. And on the descending phase, well, that is the same as the nerve cells. That's caused by potassium entering the cell. And the action potential of a nerve cell is very quick. It's about 5 milliseconds. Well, of course, this is a bit slow, because this is going to be probably about 1 second for that to happen. Because you need 70 of those firings per minute, so just under 1 second. And the channels are involved. The calcium channels, obviously they're different. You don't have them in the nerve cells. And the potassium channels which are involved they're a different kind of voltage gated channel than the ones you get in nerves. And that's a bit of background information. Okay, so what happens is the cells of the sinoatrial node all fire, and that causes depolarization in the cells of the right atrium and the left atrium, and that causes the atria to contract. Of course, when the atria contract, what happens is blood is pumped into the two ventricles. Now, it's pretty important that you don't want the ventricles to contract at the same time as the atria, because if you did, the blood wouldn't go anywhere. So there's got to be a gap between the atria firing and the ventricles firing. Okay? And this is achieved because here, in this area here, I'll draw, there is no conductance. Okay, it's called a septum, and there's no conductance of the action potential. All right. Any conduction has got to go through this thing here called the Atrioventricular Node. Okay, so that will be stimulated to fire as the cells of the atria fire, but there'll be a time lag, and that's really important because this firing of the atrioventricular node causes the ventricles to contract eventually, and of course you want that to happen a fraction of a second later than the atria contracting. So the cells of this depolarize, and then the depolarization spreads down these conducting fibers, which again, they're all specialized myocytes. It's not nervous tissue, it's specialized myocytes. And that's called the bundles of, they're called the bundles of His, made of Purkinje tissue. And that will carry the impulses down to the bottom of the ventricles, first of all, and it will cause the ventricles to contract. So of course all the ventricle myocytes will all then depolarize. When they depolarize, they contract. And the blood, I haven't drawn any blood vessels here, but of course the blood vessels from the ventricles are going to go up into the pulmonary artery and into the aorta. Okay, so just to summarize the sequence of events there then. So you get this depolarization of the membrane is really important. And it goes from about minus 60, 70 millivolts inside the cells, and it goes up to about 30 plus 30 millivolts. And when that happens, if it happens in one of the myocytes, it causes the myocyte to contract. Okay, so first of all, you get a depolarization of the sinoatrial node. That will happen roughly about once a second, just all by itself. That's a natural pacemaker. This will cause wavelet depolarization in the atria, which will cause then the cells, the myocytes, to contract. That depolarization in the atria will then pass to the atrioventricular node, and there's a bit of a delay there. It's really important. The atrioventricular node, the depolarization then passes through the bundles of His, which are all over the ventricles, and that causes all the myocytes in the ventricles to contract, or to depolarize, and then to contract, and the blood is forced out of the heart. Right, in the next video, we're going to talk about how is the rate of the heart increased or decreased, depending on the physiological needs of the organism. Okay, so no intervention. The rate's going to be about 70 beats a minute. That's controlled by the sinoatrial node, but that can be speeded up or slowed down depending on what's needed. So we'll do that in the next video.